In the first video, I discussed the California Civil PE application process along with the CSP seismic exam. Second video, I discussed the SDR books, the workbook, and the practice exams, and the building code and seismic load standards that go along with that. In this video, I'm just going to focus on the 2024 SDR On-Demand Webinars for anyone interested, so you know essentially what comes with that. So the purchase, pretty straightforward. You would want to click on the purchase button there. It does note that this is valid for 4 months. I'll discuss that a little bit more in detail shortly. When you do click on that purchase button, you will have to create a on-demand subscription account, username, usually email, and a password. And then after you make the purchase, of which you can choose a start date. You can either have it start immediately, or if you know a particular date that you want to start the subscription, you can select a future date. Once you decide to access that, you want to click where it says log in under for returning users, and then typically you're going to put in your email for your username and then the password you had chosen previously. As I mentioned, the subscription time is for 4 months or until you pass the seismic exam, whichever comes first. If you will not be accessing the videos for 3 or more days in a row, I recommend that you use the pause reactivate option. This works well for people who maybe can only study on the weekends or that can only study during weeknights. Doing that will extend your access beyond the original 4-month duration. This is noted on the frequently asked questions section of the home page, specifically the SDR Webinars tab. Is there an option to pause my on-demand access for extended periods for study breaks and or vacations? The answer is yes. Wix did recently add a new feature that allows us to set a future pause date and a future reactivate date. But that's only for accounts that are currently active. So your account would have to be taken out of pause mode, and then you could give me a date of when you want it paused in the future and then what date you want it reactivated. You can always leave it paused and then follow up for a reactivation date later. And then you can request a pause as often as you want, and that will essentially extend your original subscription by the total number of days that the account was paused. After you do make the purchase, there's an automated confirmation email that comes from Wix. It'll say it's coming from info@seismicreview.com, but actually it's coming from Wix. And there's some additional information there about the building code, whether it's the IBC or the CBC, as well as ASCE 716. And then the bottom has some very important questions for me to know, and that is outlined here. First off, is your Civil PE application status exam eligible in the Connect portal? If you go back to the first video talking about the application process, there's the different status definitions. There's under review, in technical review, deficiency, that's if there's something missing, like you don't have enough qualifying experience or you don't have enough references. And then the last status there is exam eligible. That's when you're able to pay for an exam, whether it's a seismic or surveying, in the Connect portal, and then eventually schedule that. And that whole process from when you submit the application to where you reach exam eligible could easily take 5 to 6 months. It's going to be even longer if your application is deemed deficient during that time period. So that's why it's important to know this is a 4-month subscription. It may take 5 to 6 months, so you don't want to start the subscription if you haven't even submitted your application yet. Or at least if you purchase the webinars, you may want to put a pause on it for a while. So the next question is, do you have a CSP seismic exam date yet? That would obviously be if you've reached exam eligible, that may apply to you. And if yes, what date is your CSP exam? And then the last comment here is to confirm that you'd like to continue with the SDR On-Demand Webinars. Once you confirm that, then I send one additional email that has 7 PDF attachments that are all very important. You need to read this email completely because there's a ton of information in there, and also the handouts are important. So the first handout is what I say, just read this first, and that looks like this. I'm not going to zoom in on it, but you want to read all 15 items. It's kind of general information about the exam, general information about how to prepare for it, information about the course itself, and pretty much the steps to go through. So it's a kind of a big overview of that process. And then the next handout is what I call the on-demand best practices. And that's this handout, and this is 3 pages long. This is a bit more in-depth than the read this first document. It's very specific about the on-demand webinars themselves. Talks about the videos. There's nearly 70 videos, varying lengths. Some have audio, some do not. And I spell that out. Refer to the video outline. That's going to be the third handout. And then talking about the highlights, example problems. Again, back to the video outline. And then as your exam gets closer, making sure that you contact me to set up your ClassMarker account to take the online computer-based test practice exam. So lots of information here that you want to read through. Then the third handout is the on-demand video outline. And that is also 3 pages, I think. We'll find out. And it breaks down each chapter, the videos that are associated with that chapter. So chapter 1 has 2 parts. The first part is 30 minutes long. The second part is 43 minutes long. And then it's important to pay attention to the sections that are covered in those particular videos. So usually what I would recommend is before you watch chapter 1, part 1 video, that you read the sections 1.1 to 1.6 in the workbook before you view the video. Now you don't have to do that. You could just have your workbook open, and as I'm covering the sections in the video, you can refer to the workbook. So not everybody has to read it first and then go through the video, whatever works best for you. So the same thing for chapter 2. There's really only 1 video for that. Chapter 3, chapter 4, what I do recommend is that there's multiple choice problems in part 3 of the workbook that are associated with each chapter. There's also part 2 example problems that are associated with each chapter, and I'll show you how that applies in a moment. But I would recommend that, for instance, when you're covering chapter 1, after you complete chapter 1, you go to the part 2 example problems associated with chapter 1, and you solve those, or you at least view the videos that cover those example problems. And then jump to the multiple choice problems for chapter 1, and those are going to start with a 1, obviously. So problem 1.1 through maybe it's 1.27, something like that. Those are all chapter 1 multiple choice problems. And then once it gets to 2.1, now you're in chapter 2. Same thing for chapter 3 and 4 and so on. But what I recommend is you do not go on to the next chapter until you complete the example problems. Well, first off, view all the videos associated with the chapter, complete the example problems associated with that chapter, and then the part 3 multiple choice problems associated with that chapter. And do that before you go on to the next chapter, and repeat that process. So here we got chapter 6 all the way to chapter 14. Once you complete that, you've completed the part 1 lecture notes essentially for the workbook. And then the part 2 example problems, there's 23 problems, and most of the videos are fairly short, 8 minutes or 12 minutes. Sometimes they get rather long, complicated problems like problem number 19, 42 minutes long. So again, you don't have to solve these problems by yourself. If you'd rather just watch the video, have your workbook open, follow the steps, that might be good enough. And then you would want to go to the multiple choice problems associated with that chapter. So you see problems number 1, 2, and 3, those are all associated with chapter 1. Problems 4 through 8 are associated with chapter 3 and 4. So the first two parts of those problems 4 through 8, part A and B, are associated with chapter 3. So you could complete those while you're working on chapter 3. You could do parts A and B for problems 4 through 8 and then save parts C, D, and E for when you complete chapter 4. And then there's some other portions or problems that are associated with chapter 4 as well. A few on chapter 5, 6, quite a few on 8, and one on chapter 9, and then we jump to chapter 13. That last problem is a retaining wall problem. It's really not important for you to cover, and I try to make that clear in the outline there. And then there's some videos for what I call practice problems. Number 1, these are not exam type questions. They're multiple choice, but I will kind of present it as almost like a video test, and you can download a answer sheet for both the exams and go through it on your own. The first video has no audio, so you would just play and pause to go through all the problems, and then at the very end you go back and you grade yourself, and then you can view the practice problems number 1, part 1 or part 2 videos to look at the full solutions and commentary to those questions. So maybe you only miss, I don't know, maybe 20 of those 56 questions in the part 1 practice problems, or I should say practice problems number 1 videos. So you might just go back and cherry pick, figure out, okay, which problems did you struggle with, and you could watch the video commentary for that. Or you could watch the entire videos for all of them. Same thing for practice problems number 2. And then the final review, that is when you're all done essentially with all videos and all multiple choice problems and the practice problems number 1 and number 2 videos, and now you're just about ready to take practice exams, whether it's in the SDR Practice Exams book or other authors' books or the computer-based test online exam that is provided with the course as well. So you want to view all of these parts 1 through 4 for the final review, and I actually recommend maybe a day or two before your actual CSP exam to go back and view the final review videos again. Don't go through solving anything, but just as literally a final review. Then the fourth handout is the CSP exam checklist. And that is a one-page PDF file. And essentially I'm just going through the steps of what you should be accomplishing as from start to finish, from when you first sign up for the class and up to and including taking the exam. So you should be familiar with that and essentially go through and check off the steps. Do as many as you can. The more you do, the more likely you're going to pass on the first attempt, or second if you're taking it for a second time. The fifth attachment is password protected, and I frequently get questions from people when I send them this email. They'll say, hey, 2 of the files are password protected, please provide the password for it. Well, it is provided unless of course you don't read the email itself. So read through the email. There's a password that's going to be used on the 5th and 6th attachments. The 5th is what I refer to as the SDS, SD1, SDC, or seismic design category colored charts. It's 4 pages, and the purpose of this is for you to quickly determine the SDS value, the SD1 value, and the seismic design category when you're given the S sub S and S1 values and enough information at least to determine the risk category. So if you haven't started on the course or you haven't taken the exam before, none of that probably means anything to you, but I guarantee you it will once you start getting into it. Then the fifth attachment, that's what I refer to as the quick reference sheets. Other people call them cheat sheets, but I despise that term. They're not cheating, they're just quick reference sheets that kind of summarize many of the equations or the tables and things that show up in the IBC and ASC 716. So this is page 1 of 20 pages, and this one is just summarizing the risk category and what types of buildings or structures that's associated with. Both of these handouts, the colored charts and the QR or quick reference sheets, are included with the course. I do not sell them separately, so in order to get them you would have to purchase the course. And then the last handout is the Building Design Authority. This is a document from the board that just reminds you what civil engineers are permitted to do. They may design any building of any type except public schools and hospitals. Structural engineers may design any building of any type, and that's pretty much the main purpose of this. You'll also get this as one of the emails, one of the last emails having to do with the computer-based test, which we'll talk about in a moment. And again, read over that entire email from top to bottom, in addition to the attachments that you're going to want to print out, 3-hole punch, and put them in a binder. So I think it's the best practices handout where I talk about the different references you should have, references 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first one I would say you want to use more than anything else would be the handouts that are provided. So you want to print them out, 3-hole punch, insert them into a binder. The SDS, SD1, SDC colored charts, the quick reference sheets, all other handouts, any additional notes that you want to put in with that as well should be really your first go-to reference while you're studying for the course, doing any practice exams or multiple choice problems, and for sure during the CSP seismic exam. And add notes, tabs, post-its as needed to make yourself more efficient at finding things. Then my advice would be, in terms of during the exam, you want to keep this binder on the top of your stack, say sitting on top of the tabletop where you're taking the exam. So here's an example of the quick reference sheets. I was just using sheet protectors to where you could slide them in, so it's essentially like two-sided paper, and you're going to want to rotate that so it's landscape view as you're flipping through it. There's a little bit of manipulating you're going to have to do, from portrait view in a binder to rotating at 90 degrees for landscape view. The workbook, as I see it, is essentially going to be your number 2 go-to reference during the exam. It might be the number 1 reference as you're going through the course and solving multiple choice problems, but by the time you get to practice exams and the CSP exam, it might be your number 2 reference. You're using the quick reference sheets and the colored charts and your hand notes and things like that more than you would necessarily the workbook. And then add notes, tabs, post-its as needed to the workbook. The reference number 3, in my opinion, would be specific copies of the 2021 IBC or 2022 CBC, if you have that instead, and ASC 716. You may have access to the full building code and load standard for ASC 716, but there's only a small percentage that we're going to use in the course, so my preference would be to make copies of those pages that are pertinent to the exam, highlight them if you wish, and then 3-hole punch, put them in a binder so you can flip through much fewer pages than you would if you're trying to go through the entire building code or ASC 716. So 3-hole punch, put those in a binder. You could also combine these with what I call the reference number 1, which includes the quick reference sheets and the colored charts. You could easily do that as well. So you can add highlighting, notes, tabs, and post-its as needed. And that would be your Number 3, go-to reference during the course, practice exams, and for sure on the CSP exam. And then the last reference would be the full versions of the IBC or CBC and ASE 716. So that's really the last thing you want to have to open up. My advice would be during the exam, you keep it on the floor in a banker's box by your feet so you can easily grab it if you need it, but it's entirely possible that if you have copies of the pertinent tables and sections and figures that you won't necessarily need to refer to ASE 716. If you do, you have it with you in your banker's box, and then you're probably even less likely that you're going to have to refer to the IBC or CBC if you have the printed pages already. All right, that brings up the computer-based test practice exam, which is an online exam that is hosted on classmarker.com. It's available during the entire testing quarter. There's 55 multiple choice questions, 2.5 hours timed. Now, if you're being provided special accommodations, just let me know. I can set it up to be time and a half or double time. There's no pausing, and you have to finish in one sitting, so it's going to be more similar to the actual CSP exam. The results will be available immediately when you complete it. You can take it up to 2 times, but it's the same exam each time. It's recommended that you take the online CBT practice exam about 1 to 2 weeks before your scheduled CSP exam. If you take it a month or 2 months in advance, there's a chance you're going to forget much of it, and that won't be of much help. If you take it too close to your exam, in particular if you don't do very well, you might be in a bit of a panic mode and might not have enough time to kind of plug the holes, the knowledge gaps, before your exam hits. Don't wait until the day before or day of your scheduled exam to take the online CBT practice exam. I need a little bit of time to get you the results, you to review it, ask for solutions. So that's going to take a little bit of time. I set a passing score of 38 out of 55. That's 69%. I don't know whether the board sets their cut score at 69 or 65%. I don't think it's 70 or above. I'm just guessing it's somewhere in the mid to upper 60s more than likely. You do not have to take it 2 times. Once is typically enough for most people. But if you do really bad, then you might want to try to fill in those knowledge gaps and then come back, retake it, narrow down the problems that you would necessarily need solutions for. So when you complete the exam, classmarker.com sends me an email showing just the questions you missed, the answers you chose, which were incorrect, and the correct answers. And I forward that email to you so you can revisit the problems you missed. For problems that you're still struggling with, you can request the complete solutions of up to 12 questions. I need a little bit of time to forward that email, and then you're going to need some time to go through it, look at the problems, get back to me, ask for the solutions. So usually we're looking at about 24 to 48 hours. Oftentimes I can get it to you pretty quick, but if it's on a weekend, if you take the test on a Saturday, I forward the results, and I'm not doing anything on a Sunday, meaning not working on a Sunday, that could be a problem, so you might have to wait till Monday. The solutions to all questions will not be provided, so those are full written out solutions I'm referring to. So once you complete that computer-based test practice exam and your exam is approaching, you want to keep studying, you want to focus on areas that you were particularly weak in, you want to get a hold of other exam type problems, practice exams in particular. It's a good idea, really a very good idea, to get varied experience solving other authors' questions because they're going to use different wording. If you're only used to the way I word problems and you get to the seismic exam and it's not exactly what you've been exposed to, there's a tendency for people to freak out and think, oh my gosh, I don't know how to solve it because he's not providing everything like seismic design review worded things. So getting a varied experience would be important. And one in particular I recommend is by AEI. They have 3 exams, and 55 questions exams like my book. In my opinion, they're more difficult than mine, and from what I hear from most people, they're more difficult than the actual CSP exam. But I think it's excellent experience for you to be exposed to more difficult problems. Now, some of the most common mistakes, these are going to be for people who took the exam and didn't pass. First off would be studying for the surveying and seismic exams at the same time. That's an absolutely terrible idea. You should never do it. Nor should you take the surveying exam and the seismic exam too close to each other. My advice is to focus on one, study for it alone, take it, and then move on to the next one. Your chances of passing with only one attempt on each are way higher than if you're going to study for and take them close to each other. Chances are you're going to fail both, or at least the seismic. I can almost guarantee it. It's very few people who will get through the seismic while they're studying for the surveying at the same time and taking them close to each other. Another common mistake would be assuming that the level of difficulty of the seismic exam is going to be similar to the 8-hour and the surveying exams. In my opinion, it's not. It's way harder for most people. Not everybody, but for most people. Not completing all or most of the items on the CSP exam checklist. I went through that handout briefly. This one's probably the biggest out of most, or as big as one or others that I've already discussed, and that's work demands or family demands or both that interfere with studying for the CSP exam. It's not uncommon to hear from somebody who said, I didn't pass, but to tell you the truth, I really didn't have time to spend on it because of family or work or both. So that's something you just got to work through. Focusing too much on viewing the on-demand videos and not nearly enough on solving problems. Solving problems being the Part 2 example problems, the Part 3 multiple choice, the practice problem videos, and the practice exams. Probably no chance you're going to pass, or very little chance you're going to pass if you just view the videos and think you're going to walk in and take the test. Also, not solving the Part 3 multiple choice problems before taking any practice exams. That's another mistake some people will make, is they'll think, okay, I'm going to just watch the videos and then I'm going to skip the example problems and I'm going to skip the multiple choice problems and I'm going to jump right to the practice exams, because those are closer to what the real exam is going to be like. Oftentimes that's a huge mistake. The multiple choice problems are, I like to compare it to learning how to run. The multiple choice problems are walking. You got to learn how to walk before you can learn to run. So if the practice exams and the CSP exam are examples of having to run, you got to learn to walk first, and that's the multiple choice problems. Many of them are going to be easier than what you're going to see on the CSP exam, but you got to start simple and start easy problems and then work your way up to the more difficult stuff. Another common mistake, not viewing the final review videos before you take any of the practice exams, not taking the 3 SDR practice exams and or other practice exams by other authors such as AEI, not taking the online CBT practice exam at all, or waiting until 1 or 2 days before the CSP exam to take the online CBT practice exam. If you don't give yourself enough time to absorb the mistakes you made and ask for solutions, that could be bad news for your exam results. And then not sticking to an exam strategy during the CSP exam. That's really common for people to get stuck on one dumb problem that happened maybe at the very beginning of the exam, and they end up spending 15 to 20 minutes on that one problem when they really only had 3 minutes that they should have put in on that particular problem. And that can really ruin your chances of passing. Okay, and that's it as far as the SDR On-Demand Webinars. If you have any questions, go to the Contact Us area, send me an email at info@seismicreview.com. Thank you.